get tired of that video. Welcome to the Friday Night Podcast, South and West Edition. He's Shaw Sports Regional Editor J.T. Pedelty. I'm Daily Chronicle Sports Editor Eddie Carifio and J.T. You know, if there's one thing we have in common, obviously, it's the Interstate 8. Your schools, my schools, thanks to recent events, all the schools are, covered by Friday Night Drive, and they're having themselves a year this year right now as we're through 2 weeks. Teams are 9-3. You've got, I guess, technically two of them playing each other this week. So that conference is doing some things. I think we're going to spend a lot of time in there today.
Yeah, not a conference game between Ottawa and LP, but they'll have a conference game later in the season. Second year in a row they've had to play each other twice. But yeah, I mean, this is no secret that the Interstate 8 is really good medium-large conference, medium-large size school conference around here. When you start with Morris, Sycamore, Rochelle, Caneland is firmly in that conversation, and then you got LP and Ottawa, who are teams who, consistently one of them usually finishes a 4-5, a 5-4. I mean, it's not unheard of for this conference to send 5 of its 6 teams to the playoffs, and that really looks like a possibility again this year.
Yeah, no, it's and this week a lot of interesting stuff in the I-8 if you look at it, because there's a bunch of wins on the table. Obviously, Morris is going to have their hands full. We'll get to that. They have Peoria, really good game. Sycamore set up for a win this week, playing a team Morris beat last week. So if they want to, keep not like literal pace in the standings, but they want to keep pace, getting a win there is good. And Rochelle's got an interesting battle with a win. We're going to get to all of those later, but figured we could start up here. Start with Caneland and DeKalb, and this is a interesting one. And for a second year in a row, I've been looking forward to it. And for a second year in a row, the way the schedule falls, I'm not actually going to be able to cover it. I'll be at Sycamore, I'm at Seymour. But this is a really interesting one. The former Northern Illinois Big 12 foes. You got Caneland coming off a 42-37 win against Lamont. They were in control in that one, and Lamont made things interesting kind of late. Caneland had to hold them off. Carter Grabowski, running back, defensive back, huge game at 213, I think was the official, 212, something like that was the official tally with 3 touchdowns. Huge game for him. He's having a huge start to the year after playing well. Obviously, last year he's even elevated his game even more. And they're playing at DeKalb. They crushed DeKalb last year. It was 40. I'm trying to remember the score last year because, of course, I didn't write it down. It was like 42-6 or something like that. It wasn't close. Because DeKalb had opened the year last year with a really tough loss to Sycamore, then a really tough loss to Plainfield, I want to say South, either Plainfield North or Plainfield South, lost on a last-second field goal. And after that, the wheels kind of fell off, and they got hammered in 5 or 6 games in a row. This year, they're coming in, tough loss to Sycamore, but rebounded with a 26-8 win against Phillips. So they're kind of in a different place. Their offense has very high capabilities. Even though I think it's 3 touchdowns in each of their first 2 games, but still a really powerful offense with Illinois recruit Devon Grant. And it's weird because Grant hasn't had those explosive numbers you'd expect out of him. Game 1, they were without their starting quarterback, Cole Latimer. That kind of kept the passing down. Game 2 was Latimer's first game, so a little bit of a learning curve there. Also, you have other teams whose sole focus is taking him away. I remember Latimer, who I think you could describe safely as a gunslinger. He tried in the Phillips game to get the ball into Grant on a deep pass into the end zone. 3 guys sandwiching him on the coverage there. And Grant still almost came up with the ball. But so, teams focus on him. They've had other players like Darian Strotter, Jack Rosenau step up. So this just strikes me as this is going to be a very interesting, very high-scoring game between 2, let's just say, motivated teams going in.
Well, I know I read your preview, available now on FridayNightDrive.com. But I read your preview for this game, and one of the things that stood out to me was, and maybe a little unexpected to me, was that, DeKalb's defense has kind of, maybe I don't want to say necessarily surprised, but that was one of the things that head coach Derek Schneeman kind of shouted out in your preview was, our defense has really been kind of flying around and doing well. So, when you talk about a defensive kind of back and forth game, we saw a few of those in the NFL week 1. And when you have that type of game, one stop at the right time, one play at the right time can kind of make the difference.
Yeah, even though I think it's going to be high scoring, like you said, it's going to be the team that can come up with the stop. I mean, Canelan did it last week when they needed it to, stop Lamont's rally. I we'll see which one gets it done this week. I think the Cal defense has been really 22-21 against Sycamore, gave up the 3 touchdowns in that one. The 1 touchdown against Phillips last week, they look really good. They've been forcing turnovers in both games. Grant has a fumble recovery, and Travis Moore, I'm sorry, their defensive lineman, he's got 2 interceptions in 2 games so far and almost had his hands on a third. So they're forcing turnovers. And by the way, Moore also their lead running back. So, just the skill set you expect out of a defensive lineman.
Yes.
So, I'm always great for using the word when you're talking. But no, I'm really excited for this one. This is, wish I'd be able to be there. I mean, Sycamore also going to be a very good game. But this one, probably going to go 3 hours, probably going to be very high scoring. That's at least my thoughts on this. And as we know, I'm, consistently right about everything.
I do love those running backs, when we type in rosters or our previews, just kind of as an instinct, you almost always go running back / linebacker. Sometimes there'll be a running back / defensive back that throws it in. Those guys that are running back / DL, those are my favorites, man. Those little bowling balls that just, nobody wants to get in front of them and tackle them. High motor guys, and like you said, has the hands to make an interception from a defensive line position. Those are always fun kids to cover.
Yeah, Moore has more of that build of a more modern day defensive lineman, a little taller, a little sleeker, I guess, for lack of a better word. But this is going to be a really good one, and I'm excited for it. And the one I will be at,
that's what I was going to lead us to.
So that's where we're going. Muhammad Seymour. It's Muhammad, right?
Muhammad.
I've been saying it for 2 years now. You think I should get it by now?
I'm surprised they're coming up here. I feel like every time one of our teams play Muhammad Seymour, it's in Muhammad.
And I guess it was apparently a home and home with Sycamore last year because Sycamore was down there in week 3. That was a really good game, 21-13 win for the Spartans in that one. Muhammad Seymour, perpetually a playoff team, but could be running into some trouble this year. They could be falling to 0-3. I know we don't extend that far south, but that's one of the teams if we would be focusing on for like a must-win type game right now because 0-3 going into a tough conference. They had a really good year last year, so they could be in some trouble with a loss. And I would think going in, Sycamore would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of probably about a touchdown favorite would be my thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I would think Sycamore's got to be your favorite, especially it's not a horrible drive, but it's a bit of a drive. Yeah, I mean, Muhammad Seymour is one of those teams that, as I mentioned when we said, it seems like they kind of keep coming up with the teams up here. I don't know if that's, they're members of that, of the Apollo Conference, kind of go south like the Effinghams and the Mattoons of the world. But kind of they keep running up. I mean, 2 of their 4 non-conference this year are against Interstate 8 teams, and those Interstate 8 is desperately, I think, would love to get above 6 schools, get back to at least 8 just for the sake of scheduling. So you don't have Ottawa having to play LP or everyone having to play Muhammad Seymour or something. Seems like a pretty far trip. Doesn't seem like but man, they don't seem to mind playing the best teams in the Interstate 8. So yeah, they're definitely one that they need to get for Muhammad Seymour heading into their conference play. And, nice one here for Sycamore. You come in 1-1 and you're, almost a 2-0 team, kind of 2 really close games, low scoring games. And that Interstate 8's looming for, Sycamore as well. Rochelle, then Ottawa, then Canelan, then LP, then Morris. So definitely one Sycamore needs to get. I'm like you. I like their chances.
Yeah, they're one thing that I noticed and I kind of focused on in the kind of preview stuff I did. Again, there's also a one surprise about every team kind of featurey thing I did. That's also available on FridayNightDrive.com in addition to the previews. Now that my corporate duty is done, their offense has been putting up some yards. They're averaging about 300 yards a game. But if you look at it, they've scored 3 touchdowns a game. The 20 points in the loss to Moline in overtime. And it came up like half a yard short on the 2-point conversion on that one that would have won them the game. And then their 1-point win against Sycamore against the DeKalb 22-21. they're getting 300 yards a game, but they're not exactly putting up the points. You're 300 or more yards a game. They're not putting up the points you'd expect. I asked Coach Joe Ryan about that, and he pointed out, and I feel a little dumb for not noticing it, that they've had some very long drives this year, and that kind of when you are moving the ball more, that's obviously lowering how much you're going to score. Because you look, they ate up the last almost 8.5 minutes in that game against DeKalb, running out the clock. So they got no points out of about 70 yards, I think, that drive, because it started on their own 14 and ended in the red zone. So they got 70, 80 yards there, no points. They had a 17 play drive against Moline last week that got them their, I want to say, second touchdown. That obviously eats up yards without getting you points. So stuff like that they're, I guess, controlling nature of the clock has resulted in them getting yards, but not necessarily the advanced metric of expected points, if that's even a thing, which I'm sure it is.
Hey, you know what? Every drive doesn't have to come up with points yet. That's the thing. Yet sometimes you're eating clock. Sometimes you flip the field and you cash in the next possession because you have great field position. There's a lot of ways to succeed, have a successful drive. They don't all have to end up in points, although you love them to end up in points. While we're going down the list, NIB 12, Morris, you alluded to it earlier, Morris at Peoria High, 2-2-0 teams playing each other. I always call them Peoria High, and I'll change it in our stuff on Friday Night Drive. People might notice it. That's just because living down here, the Peoria Journal-Star, it was always Peoria High, because they had 4 different schools. So it was Peoria High to stick out that one. So if I keep saying Peoria High, forgive me. It's just ingrained in me from my childhood growing up reading football stories or what have you. But Peoria or Morris at Peoria High. This is one of those matchups, one of those rivalries that the whole state kind of doesn't get talked about a lot. It's not a conference rival. It's not everything. But man, when these two teams play, it's fun, Eddie.
Yeah, recent rivalry at that, and it's fun and it's high scoring. I'm trying to think of an exciting adjective, but man alive, what was it last year? It was 58-52, I think. Obviously, that semifinal game a couple years ago, it was 76-56. Obviously, Peoria, the way they run their offense, lend themselves to more higher scoring games. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these are kind of the more lower scoring games. Well, not the 76-56, but these are still kind of a little on the lower end for Peoria. They put up points. You think Morris, you think defense, and then you think they look and they're consistently giving up 50 points every time they play Peoria, but that's just a function of this Peoria offense.
Yeah, I remember talking with Susie when Peoria High went through a coaching change, and kind of, are they still going to do this? The answer is yes. Week 1, they scored 42 points and shut out Champaign Centennial. They're just coming off a 58-31 win over Peoria Notre Dame in week 2. So they've scored 100 points already this season. I would have to think that Morris would love to keep this game a little more in the 30s and 20s rather than get in the 60s and 50s. But Morris can score. They can throw the ball. They can. But last week they kind of slowed things down a bit against aforementioned Muhammad Seymour. Caden Curran ran for 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. Morris won 33-14. Not that 33 is necessarily low scoring, but kind of did more on the ground. So I imagine that would be their goal for Peoria High, is like we talked about, eat up some time, eat up some yards, keep Peoria High's offense on the sideline, and hopefully cash those in with touchdowns, and Morris can move to 3-0.
Yeah, it's an interesting game and an interesting matchup. You figure that's the more strategy. Most years, you would assume, and you see it's still putting up in the 50s, but again, that's still kind of, no one wants a moral victory. Hey, we gave up 50 points, but it's been a competitive series as well, so that's always a good thing. Always a good thing. I was segueing in my mind ahead of time. I think it's a good point to probably turn to Sam Ramirez here, bring him on in. We are talking what's at Interstate 8. Sam, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent, man. Excellent. And, kind of bringing you in, Eddie was talking about interesting. I was like, who's interesting is Sam. And you've got some interesting ball games up your way, Sam, in the kind of Sauk Valley area.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about
one that's kind of caught my eye.
Talking about Oregon Byron.
Hey, wait a minute. We can do that one first. But I was actually Rochelle Lewin's kind of,
Let's talk about Rochelle, Lena Winslow. I think that's going to be a fun one tomorrow night in Rochelle. And the thing about Lena Winslow, I think their loss to Stockton last week might have taken a little bit of the wind out of the sail going into this game tomorrow night. And even with Rochelle's 28-15 win over Chicago King, I think this was going to be more of a collision course type game had, Rochelle dominated their game last week and if Lena Winslow would have beaten Stockton. But on paper, this is a good matchup. And I always say Lena Winslow, they're not afraid to take on tough teams in non-conference games. Since 2020, they played Chicago DePaul College Prep. They played Woodstock Marion. They played Decatur St. Teresa. Now this year they got Rochelle. So Lena Winslow is not afraid to take on, tough non-conference opponents because they're expecting to go to state every year. And these are the kind of games that prepare you for those postseason games. But the interesting fact about this game, the last time Lena Winslow lost 2 games in a row, guys, week 7 and 8 of the 2014 season. That is the last time the Panthers have lost back-to-back games. So that they're going to have a chip on their shoulder going into Rochelle on Friday night.
Yeah, that's right. Even with the Stockton loss, I still found this one interesting because obviously from a motivation standpoint, I was unaware about the 2014 thing, but that just adds another fuel onto the fire. They're coming off a loss. They're hungry. I mean, I don't think it changes the appeal of this game, that loss. Both teams, obviously, very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to point out for Rochelle, they've been getting things done this year. This Dylan Manning kid, he's only a junior. He played as a freshman, if I'm not mistaken. He's been around. At least I know he had a huge year last year. I'm pretty sure he played as a freshman. Had 169 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. They got themselves an 8-minute drive. 8-minute drive to only go 55 yards. If that's not Rochelle football, I'm not really sure what is.
Yeah, to me, Rochelle football, though, the standard they have set for so many years is very high. And, with like you said, the junior running back they have right now, he is just he's fun to watch. And when you watch him on film, he's just a good player. And, Lena Winslow still has a lot of talent, like you said, Eddie. And yeah, you're probably right. Maybe even though Lee Wynn did lose last week, close game for Rochelle, maybe it doesn't take much away from this game because when you see Lena Winslow at Rochelle, I think coming into this year, and I think I might have even mentioned it with you guys when we chatted when the schedules came out back in July, this was the game that jumped off the page when it came to all the non-conference games that we follow. And in our area here, more of the west of you guys, we follow the Big Northern, the Track 8, the Upstate Illini, and the Western Big 6. And I think of all of those games, this was the non-conference game we're most looking forward to.
And, you've got talking about Dylan Manning, one of the things that stands out, you talk about Rochelle football. The one thing, I typed in a lot of Rochelle box scores over the year in games against Streeter, against Ottawa, LaSalle, Peru. And the one thing is, when things are going right in that offensive system, you don't usually have a guy putting up 150 yards. You have 6 guys putting up, 50 yards. And that's kind of how it's built. So that kind of tells you what kind of special athlete he is and how well he fits that system, that in a system that's designed to balance it out, you still got a guy putting up, conference MVP worthy type numbers. It's really a credit to him, a credit to the line in front of him, and a credit to what Rochelle's been able to do this year.
Yeah, that says a lot about him as a running back, and it shows that they have the confidence in him to get the job done. You're right, JT. When you look at Rochelle, they normally, you're right, have 5 or 6 guys. Maybe you have 3 guys who are, pretty close, equal in yards, but then the number 4, 5, and 6 running backs are equal, but maybe a little bit behind 1 through 3, but not this year. It sounds like they really got their go-to guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned earlier Oregon, Brian. This one stuck out to me a little bit. Oregon's 2-0 going into this one. Byron, obviously, going to be 2-0. I just didn't stick out to me as like, okay, Oregon's getting the win. They're going to go. But it's sort of one of those things, and I know players and coaches don't want to hear this, but as people are analyzing it, looking for it, if Oregon puts up a battle in this one, plays them, even in the way, that Dixon did, and sort of where it's like not ugly, but it's not close. But like that's going to set things up for Oregon to maybe, hey, okay, maybe they're not going to beat Byron, but are they on the level of Dixon? Are they going to be able to maybe finish behind Byron? Are they going to be able to go be the 8-1 team out of this conference?
You bring up a great point, Eddie. The players believe that they can go into Byron tomorrow night and get a win, and that's all that matters is what the players believe. But the rest of us, the fun part about our job is we get to analyze it. Now, do I think Oregon is going to go into Byron and win tomorrow night? No, but I think this is a good measuring stick as to whether or not maybe they can compete with Dixon in a couple of weeks. Will Oregon be the team that maybe goes 8-1, or the team that goes 7-2? I think we're going to learn a lot about Oregon tomorrow night, and we'll keep in mind too, Byron's banged up. They took on a very physical Dixon team last week. Their sophomore Caden McGowan, who was one of the best freshmen I ever saw play football, he had a severe leg injury. It looks like he's going to miss significant time. And I know there were a few other Byron players that were banged up in that game last week against Dixon. So don't know if they're available tomorrow night, but still, this is an opportunity for Oregon to maybe show what they have. It's been since 2009, the last time Oregon won a game in Byron. It's been, 15, 16 years. And as a matter of fact, Byron has won 11 in a row against Oregon. So I know the Hawks are excited, and it's a great rivalry. Two towns 9 miles apart. Excited for that game in Byron tomorrow night.
And we're about knocking on the door of that Oregon-Dixon showdown, not to look too far ahead, but that's week 5. It'll be in Oregon. So that'll obviously be a good one. North Boone's off to a 2-0 start. And I believe Oregon finishes off with Dwight, which is kind of one of those teams, a little bit smaller, but that kind of, Susie and I have talked about multiple times that it's kind of like, boy, they're down in 1A now. They're not co-oping with Gardner South Wilmington. That's a team to kind of keep an eye on as well. Coming off a surprise Cinderella run to the 2A quarterfinals last year, I believe.
I think they were the quarterfinals, and Dwight last week beat Allman. I think it was 27-13. I know there's a lot of people in Oregon that are sort of following the Dwight schedule. I believe they had a forfeit win in week 1, and that's because Oregon and Dwight play in week 9. And to me, I think it'll be exciting. I've been to like 45 different stadiums, never been to Dwight, so looking forward to heading down there in week 9. But yeah, first you got to get through the Big Northern, and then a big non-conference game at the end of the year for the Hawks.
Yeah, Dwight's got a nice stadium, so if you happen to have a reason to go there, I highly recommend it, Sam.
Nice. Yep. I will be there in week 9 broadcasting the game.
Now you got me thinking about how many Illinois ones I've been to already. My top guess would be about 24 at this point, but I think it would have to be more than that. But if you've only done 45, well, I'll count them up later. This will be something fun for a feature later. But in the meantime, we got eliminated.
I have to be over 100. I have to be.
Yeah, no, I would imagine. But I think it's eliminator time, is it not?
Sounds good to me.
Good.
Okay, so where we are right now, everybody's still alive. Rob Osterl, is that how we say his last name? Osterly. Rob Osterly kept the guest streak going that you started in week 1. He got that right, picking Wilmington last week. I picked Ottawa over Streeter. That one ended up coming through handily, even though I was a little nervous about that one at first, picking that one. And JT kept his streak going with Marquette over Madison. So, Sam, what you got for us this week?
I'm going to stay in the Big Northern, guys. I like Stillman Valley over Rockford Lutheran. Stillman Valley, they got beat up pretty badly in week 1 against Marengo. I believe it was like 42-0. But last week had a bounce-back win over Genoa Kingston. And now they play Rockford Lutheran tomorrow night, Friday night. And I saw Lutheran play last week. Lutheran with only one senior. They only have about 17 kids out for football, not just varsity, but within their football program. And it's a Crusaders team that's a new coach trying to find their identity. So with that being said, I think Mike Lawler, Stillman Valley, that's my pick for Friday night to get the win.
I saw you pick that one, and I don't know as much about Rocky Lou, but I do know they went 7-4 last year and, made the playoffs and everything. I'm like, wow, he's taking a swing here with this one, but sounds like they're going through a little bit of a rebuilding phase.
Yeah.
So, Stillman doesn't want to be discounted from that conversation at the top of the BNC either. So obviously, this is a big one for them. JT, what you got?
I'm taking a tiny bit of a swing. Maybe it's 2 0-2 teams, so I'm picking someone to get their first win. That someone's Princeton. Princeton, a surprising 0-2. I'm kind of shocked to say Princeton's 0-2.
Right.
They haven't been 0-2 since 2017. So it's been 8 years since they've lost their first 2. They play Sherrard this week. I don't buy that Princeton's going to 0-3. Sherrard's only scored 1 touchdown this season. That was on a kickoff return. Princeton's, has not played awful at all. football. I think Princeton over Sherrard is my eliminator pick this week, Eddie.
And I'm not taking a swing in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I don't even think I'm using a good strategy here because we only get to pick a team to win once and to lose once.
Mm-hmm.
This may not be the best strategy, but I just wanted to get one that's probably as close to a sure thing as you can get. So I'm going with Dixon over Rock Falls this week, burning both of them off. I just wanted to make sure I get a win and get through the first third of this season. And that's, I think, as good of a chance as you can get for one. Rock Falls obviously has gone through their struggles here in Dixon. We've talked about it. And they didn't look totally awful against Byron, in the 28-7 loss last week against the team that usually wins 42-7. So, or 52-7. So I'm going Dixon over Rock Falls with my eliminator pick.
Seems like a safe bet.
Yeah. So sorry for the lack of drama this week. I need to recover after the Ottawa Streeter nail biter. Although it ended up obviously in my favor.
It was scoreless after one quarter. So
yeah. I wasn't paying as close attention as I probably should have Friday night. We won't get into what my Friday night looked like last week, but it was I would have been losing a lot of fingernails after that first one. Top parts of fingers and probably down to the nub.
Well, Sam, thank you for being with us. Eddie, we're going to take a break, and Sam, we'll see you in a couple weeks down the road, and hopefully our other guests keep that eliminator streak alive for you, man.
Yeah, you guys will have to let me know what your guest picks next week, and hopefully see you guys in a few weeks. JT and Eddie, it's always fun.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
And let's take a
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. Since 2017, I've led the fight to reform our child welfare system and supported educational choice for every kid in Illinois. I've worked to stop the collapse of our public pensions while standing up for businesses that are being crushed by crippling mandates. And I've never forgotten who pays the bill. The work isn't finished, and as I run for re-election, I'm asking for your support. I'm Steve Reich, and I approve this message.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton in Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Wait, for those of you watching on YouTube instead of just listening to the podcast, I really liked, and this kind of segs for us here, is that Shaw local advertisement had a lot of the old newspapers, old classic microfilm type newspapers from our different markets, and that kind of leads into my LaSalle Pruitt Ottawa conversation. Because this is another one. We talked last week about how a few years ago I found a missing matchup in Ottawa Streeter football history that actually they started it in 1894, not 1895, as has always been thought. And just a few weeks ago, Eddie, I got an email from Dan Isles, who's the old Ottawa Daily Times new sports editor. He's an Ottawa high school statistician nowadays. Has forgotten more about high school sports around the Illinois Valley than I've ever known. But he found one kind of digging through old microfilm, old archives, an Ottawa LP game that had kind of been lost for a while. So, it makes you wonder how many of those are out there, these things that we think are, it's this meeting, it's this, and we feel like it's been highly documented like the NFL. But high school, back in the days, there weren't guys like us keeping tabs of every game, or as we talked about that Streeter one, it was the society editor who just happened to go to a Streeter Ottawa football game and wrote about it and was disappointed that nobody got killed in 1894. So you
I
wonder
was
how
going
many
to
of
ask,
these are out there.
did this lost game have a society editor yearning for the bloodlust of young teenagers?
Yes. But you wonder how many of these are out there, or how many schools tried a football team in 1899 and there weren't enough kids out, but we played the town next door at a pickup game, and then we didn't play for, I find that stuff interesting. Brian Hoxie is, Dan Isles of the world. There are people who are really great with that history stuff. It's never been a passion of mine, but for the people who are, it's there's got to be a treasure trove out there as everything's getting digitized, and you don't have to sit in a library and go through, you can actually use search terms to search these old stories.
Which brings us to LP Ottawa, meeting one of two, non-conference edition, I guess, this time around. They've been playing twice a year for every year post-pandemic, right?
I think this is just the second year.
Is it? Oh, well, then there you go. See, we're talking about digging up old games from 128 years ago, and I can't tell you what happened 2 years ago.
Hey, I could be wrong on that one, though. I definitely could be. But yeah, LP's won. If they did play multiple times the years before that, LP won them. They've won the last 11 of these meetings. I think this year, this one will be the 128th meeting with that one that Dan Isles uncovered. I think Ottawa comes in 2-0. LP comes in 0-2. I think, if you're going to pick a favorite, you still got to say it's LaSalle Peru. They've played tougher competition the first 2 weeks. Ottawa played a couple schools a good tick smaller than them, beating Plano in week 1, beating Streeter in week 2 in the game we talked about. An impressive showing against Streeter, 50-14. For Ottawa, they've kind of renewed their dedication to the running game. Running back Archer Chekowicz, has been very good for them. Their offensive line has been overwhelming. Ottawa has, their school motto for football is root, hog, or die. They have a statue in their courtyard with that on it. That's kind of their thing, has been their thing historically, jet sweeps, power running game. They've kind of gotten back to that a little bit this year. They've had some success. LP, meanwhile, 2 tough losses. They lost to Metamora last week, 32-20, competitive showing against a powerhouse program. They lost in week 1 to United Township, who they've kind of owned in recent years. So it's been a while since LP's been 0-2. Be interesting to see kind of how this one shakes out, Eddie.
Yeah, that loss to United probably caught us off guard a little bit, I would assume. Persich, though, has been as good as advertised for LaSalle so far in the couple of losses.
Yeah, LP quarterback Marion Persich. I think I read in Kevin Klum's preview on FridayNightDrive.com.
We get paid by the plug, I should point out.
Yes. But I read in his preview, I think LP scored 6 touchdowns this season. Every single one of them, Persich is either, I think 6, and he's ran in 5 and threw the other one. So, yeah, he's as good as advertised. Sophomore quarterback playing at this level of football is a rare thing. He did it as a freshman and was impressive. He looks even better this year. So I think this will be a really good matchup. Interestingly, both these teams, Ottawa 2-0, and, you just sit there and you say, yeah, but look who they have. They got to go into that Interstate 8. LP sitting there at 0-2, and you say, oh, man, tough path. They got to go into that Interstate 8. But there are playoff paths for both these teams. Ottawa, there's a path for them now where they wouldn't have to beat Morris, Rochelle, Sycamore, or Caneland, and they could get to 5 wins. They'd have to sweep LP, and they haven't beat LP in a while, so it's no showing. For LP, that 5th win might be tough to get to now, but if you look at their schedule, I think something like 6 of their 9 opponents, although Ottawa's twice, so that's 2 of the 6 or whatever it is, are 2-0 right now. And Sycamore is going to get wins. Rochelle is going to get wins. Morris is going to get wins. If 4 and 5 teams get in again, LP very easily could be one of those teams that get to 4 wins. But to do it, they almost have to get 2 against Ottawa, and that starts here this Friday.
Yeah, and for LaSalle, that would also need, trying to do the math quick in my head, they would have to beat one of those 4 teams, which has probably been a minute since they beat any of those Morse Shell, Sycamore, Canelan teams. I think you'd have to go back to the NIB 12 days at least for that to have happened. I don't think it's happened in the recent I-8 history. But the road is there, especially if they just need 4. They'd have to just pull off the one upset. But it's a starting 0-2 that lost to it's a lot different if they beat UT, obviously. A lot different for them.
Yeah, and a tough, close loss. One of those games that was suspended by lightning and picked up the next day. And I'm sure there's a lot of and if you're home for that, it stinks. If you're driving from LaSalle, Illinois to East Moline on consecutive days to pick up a football game in progress, it's even worse. That double the long trip, double the and maybe they got a hotel for all I know. But whatever the case is, not an ideal situation, and they're not in an ideal situation. But there's a path there, and definitely I think they're going to end up with quite a few playoff points.
Yeah, it was a weird weather weekend, week 1, because I think most of the state didn't actually have weather problems, but the Quad Cities, they had some storms. Caneland and Rock Island had, about an hour weather delay.
It made for some beautiful backdrops, though. I was down in Eureka, so we didn't send a photographer down that far, so I did the sideline pictures with the cell phone. And everything. Oh, they're beautiful pictures, and I'm a horrible photographer. It has nothing to do with me, just beautiful sky behind them. So when you have storms kind of a little way off, you have, ask the Navy guys, you get some beautiful, beautiful skies, beautiful sunsets. I'd rather just have good weather, and then the sunset can just be normal. But at least there's something good that comes with it. One other game, kind of Ottawa way.
No, we're out of Interstate 8 games. We're done. Good night.
6 teams, and we talked about all 6. But Ottawa Marquette, 1-1, kind of got well last week with a 56-14 smashing of Madison. That was my eliminator pick. They're playing Edgar, Wisconsin. Eddie, have you ever heard of Edgar, Wisconsin football?
I have not heard of Edgar, Wisconsin. Usually the Wisconsin towns like Clinton, I've heard of. I know they're on someone's schedule, like I think a BNC team or something. A couple of the small ones, like right on the border, I've heard of, but I don't know where Edgar is, and I've not heard of it before. I'm guessing small.
Well, Edgar's way up there.
Oh,
so far, in fact, that Marquette and Edgar are meeting in DeForest, Wisconsin, because that's about halfway, and that's still about a 2.5-hour trip from Marquette. So
still haven't heard of DeForest.
Well, that little north of Madison, I believe.
Okay.
But
you're talking about Madison is the halfway point.
But if you had heard of Edgar, Wisconsin, it probably would have been because of their football program. They are tied for the Wisconsin state record for most state championships by a school. They're the 2-time defending Division 7 champion. Based on their enrollment, their enrollment's just under 200. I assume Division 7 is probably their smallest class of 11-man football. I'm not sure if Wisconsin plays 8, but I assume Division 7. If it's not the smallest, it's the next to smallest, but I assume it's probably the smallest.
If I've learned something about how states do their divisions, if you have an A, the smaller number is the bigger the class. If you don't have an A, the smaller the number is the smaller So
I never thought of that.
But it's because like you look at how it's the opposite in Wisconsin as it is here. That's I don't know if it's 100% true, but in my experience, that's the way I've always noticed it, is that 7A is large in Illinois, but 7 is small in Wisconsin.
This is like when I first figured out that license plates in Illinois other states didn't follow the same rules. Like cars start with a letter and trucks start with a number.
And by the way, this is now the second entrance I have into talking about districts, but I am passing on it. Please continue talking about Marquette Edgar.
Well done. Well, you know what? This is one of those games you sit there with and you say, how does this match up? Marquette, very good, solid 1A program in Illinois, no state championships, but a couple state semifinal appearances in recent years, coming off a big win over Madison, not Madison, Wisconsin, Madison, Illinois. And then going up against a perennial state champion with a head coach who's been there, I think 51 years, in Edgar, how does it translate? I guess that's going to be the question. How does Illinois small school football translate when it goes up against Wisconsin small school football? And it's a Wisconsin superpower. I think Ottawa Marquette is still the smallest 11-man playing school in Illinois by enrollment. I talked to Ed Seuss about it a little bit about this matchup, and he's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. And he'd heard of Edgar, obviously, because if it involves high school football, Seuss knows all about it. But he said, he would compare just from what he's seen. about Edgar and things. He'd compare them to maybe like a Wilmington from around here. Now, if that's the case, then I think Marquette, has its hands full, certainly. But you don't know till you get on the field and play. That's something that's really fun about these matchups. No common opponents, no history, no anything. Meeting in a stadium that maybe none of these kids has ever been to before on either side,
or will be to again.
Playing a football game, seeing what happens. I think it's really exciting. I'll be excited to see how the Crusaders hold up against this powerhouse from Wisconsin.
You guys had any Hawks up there?
We are not. Originally, I just found out yesterday doing previews that this game wasn't in Edgar, Wisconsin, which would have been like a 4.5 or 5 hour drive. So I just found out yesterday it was almost reasonable. So I was like, man, I wonder if we have anyone up that way. But I reached out to Alex at Crystal Lake, our coworker, and even he said for him it's over a 2 hour drive. So nope, this will be a phoner and catch up, but it'll be a game I'll be following for sure.
Yeah, no, it seems definitely interesting. I think that's all the big ones for this week. I know there's a couple you wanted to mention, some 0-2 battles down that way that are interesting, including another team you wouldn't expect being. You mentioned obviously Princeton 0-2 playing Sherrard as your eliminator pick.
Yeah, and really I kind of said everything about that one. I was going to say I don't think that Princeton will be 0-3.
Well, it's in my notes, JT.
Well, we hit on it. You never know what order we'll go. The other 0-2 is the game I'm actually planning to cover Friday night. Fieldcrest at Tremont. Tremont's on a 20-game losing streak. Fieldcrest is on a 7-game losing streak. Something's got to give. I think it should be a really good game. I haven't been down to Tremont to Turk Stadium in probably 20 years. So I'm excited to go down there and get a pork chop and take in some good small school football. I'm open for a really competitive game, and hopefully Fieldcrest can snap this losing streak they've been on. I covered them once last year, and that was their one win. So they'll probably be happy to see me down there. You said, Eddie, you're with Sycamore this week?
I'm a lot less of a drive this year. You said it wasn't a bad drive to Muhammad Seymour. I didn't get a chance to disagree with you on that. It was, from up here anyway, unpleasant. Just long and winding and not enough time on an interstate. But a
lot of state highways, yeah.
So that's of course I think we could just take 47 down, and they could take 47 up if they're doing that, and they probably would have had to have left a couple hours ago. But that's the one I will be at this week. Obviously, coverage of all these games we've talked about on Friday Night Drive. Obviously, be sure to check out our live show, and by that I mean Matt Rodewald and Steve Susi. Check out their live show. We record little talking heads for it, and if our game doesn't end at 10:47, we get on the program.
I'm putting one more plug in because why not? Also, check out Shaw Local's YouTube channel for football highlights on Friday nights. We're all trying to get better with posting videos and posting highlights to the YouTube channel. Some of them have really taken off in popularity, some great plays. So definitely something to check out. A lot more interesting than hearing us talk about it after the game, but those are there too. So definitely the Friday night experience, changes for us as reporters. It changes for the kids playing, and it changes as a spectator. You could sit at home and follow games all across the northern half of the state with our YouTube channel, and then, Susie and Matt.
Pick how you want to get your information, or you can sit in the stand and watch us blabber. Also a great choice, however you choose. We appreciate you guys listening to this. We'll be back next week, hopefully with all of our eliminator streaks intact. So he's JT Pedelty. I'm Eddie Carifio. Thank you all very much.